Hat on. Who else, man? Huh? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. Hat on. Who else, man? Huh? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. Hat on. Who else, man? Huh? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. Hat on. Who else, man? Huh? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. Hat on. Who else, man? Huh? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. Hat on. Who else, man? Huh? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. Hat on. Who else, man? Huh? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. Hat on. Who else, man? Huh? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. Hat on. Who else, man? Huh? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. Hat on. Who else, man? Huh? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. Hat on. Who else, man? Huh? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. Hat on. Who else, man? Huh? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce.
By a jury. There was actually a note found on the camp grounds 2 months earlier that said, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in tent 1," but that note was discarded by the camp director, thinking it was a prank. Now, Broadway actress Kristen Chenoweth was actually supposed to be on that trip. She fell ill that weekend and was unable to go, but she says that it's haunted her entire life. So it wasn't until this year, 45 years after the murders took place, that we might finally have enough DNA evidence to convict Gene Leroy Hart. He passed away in 1979, but this might at least give some closure to the families. Hulu just released a documentary called Keeper of the Ashes about this entire event. Let me know if you're going to watch this weekend.
Conducted inhumane medical experiments without limits in the concentration camps of Auschwitz. I am Josef Mengele, a German doctor and SS officer in 1943. I was supposed to be responsible for selecting detainees upon their arrival. I was so cruel that no selection took place. I sent them all to the gas chamber. During this time, I carried out increasingly bizarre experiments, particularly on twins due to my obsession with human genetics. I subjected prisoners to organ extractions, injections of toxic substances, unnecessary surgeries, and other medical tortures, all without anesthesia, only for my personal medical experimentation. I even attempted to alter the genetics of patients to fit the criteria of my SS officer ideologies. I also performed numerous involuntary sterilizations, using methods that caused suffering to prisoners due to the infections they provoked. The human experiments I conducted at Auschwitz represent one of the darkest chapters in the history of medicine. Despite this, I was never convicted for these acts because I fled to South America for many years. I died of a heart attack in 1979 in Brazil, never having been judged for my crimes.
This is what would happen if you were the only person on Earth. Up first, if you're the only person on Earth, you can do and go anywhere you virtually want, which would be awesome, but you should be way more concerned about your survival. You have to be extremely careful where you want to seek shelter, because cities will be extremely dangerous. And without proper maintenance, they will start to fall apart pretty quickly, And you can even run into dangerous insects and animals. Next, if you wanted to go to the country, even that isn't safe. 400 nuclear power plants will begin to fail and explode, causing hundreds of nuclear explosions, which wouldn't be good at all. Now, when it comes to food, supermarkets are the place to go. They have enough canned foods there to last you decades. But if eating natural is more your style, you might have to hunt like they did back in the old days. Finally, for water, you will have thousands of liters to go through. This is from all the bottles of water at different stores and places. But eventually, you will have to learn how to purify your own water, which really isn't hard at all. So all in all, if you play your cards right, you can easily survive being the only person on Earth.
TikToker faked having cancer in order to trick people out of money via a fundraising page. A TikToker from Iowa called Madison Russo was arrested in January this year after faking having pancreatic cancer. She did this in October 2022 when she was a university student. She claimed on social media that she had been diagnosed with the life-threatening condition. Initially, people believed her, but then medical professionals came forward to cast doubt over her claims. They stated that there were medical discrepancies in her story. Police then actually got involved and looked at her medical records, which confirmed that she had never been diagnosed with cancer. She was charged with theft by means of deception for using the fake illness to raise nearly $38,000 from kind donors online. She had set up a GoFundMe in order to obtain money and has now been ordered to pay restitution. She was recently given a 10-year suspended sentence, and the judge ordered her to pay the restitution and over $1,000 fine. She will also have to complete 100 hours of community service. The judge stated that she had taken part in a criminal scheme and that serious crimes must have serious consequences. The judge stated that she had deceived friends, family, her community, other cancer victims, charities, and strangers.
These are scary videos you should never watch at night. Okay, so the video I'm about to show you shows a kid who was home alone one night when something or somebody started knocking on his door saying it was his mother. But the thing is, his mom wasn't even home because she was working the night shift. And the way it's knocking and sounding make it sound so demonic. Let me know what you think this is because it's absolutely disturbing.
You should come out. You've been in there for so long. Gabe, come out. Gabe, it's your mother. You should come out.
Then what's your name then?
I simulated my own abduction to obtain $30,000 from the Kidnapped Victims Fund. My name is Sherry Papini. I am a mother of 2 children, and on November 2nd, 2016, I was reported missing by my husband, Keith Papini. I had gone for a morning jog and did not return. Authorities quickly initiated a search to find me. About 3 weeks later, on November 24th, 2016, I was found near a highway in Woodland, California, approximately 240 kilometers from where I had disappeared. I was injured and bound with chains. The precise details of what happened during my disappearance remained unclear and gave rise to much speculation. I told investigators that I had been abducted by 2 masked Hispanic women who allegedly beat and mistreated me during my captivity. I claimed to have been released by my captors and left on the side of the road. Authorities conducted a thorough investigation into the case, but obviously found nothing. I received over $30,000 from the Kidnapped Victims Fund and, according to some sources, possibly an additional $127,567 from Social Security. Subsequently, authorities uncovered the deception, leading to my conviction and imprisonment in a federal institution in 2022.
Have you heard of the singer who narrowly escaped Ted Bundy? This is part of a series called Close Encounters, people who just barely escaped a terrible fate, so follow along for more. So Debbie Harry is the iconic singer from the band Blondie, and one night in 1970, before she was even famous, she was out late at night walking by herself in Manhattan. And that's when she was approached by an attractive man in a white Volkswagen Beetle. Sound familiar? She said she got a bad feeling from the man and said no, but he was pretty persistent. And she had been walking a while and her feet were hurting and she was tired, so eventually she kind of just gave in and got in the car. She quickly realized that something was not right with this car. The backseat had no window cranks and no handles, like there was no way for her to get out of the car. She starts panicking, but she has the wherewithal to reach her arm out of the open window and open the car door from the outside. But the man driving sees her do this, so he speeds up and takes a really sharp corner, throwing her out of the car onto the street. Years later, during the Ted Bundy trial, Debbie Harry was watching TV and immediately recognized him. Some people are skeptical and say that Ted Bundy might have been in Florida when Debbie reported seeing him, but all of these years, Debbie has remained steadfast in the fact that it was definitely him that picked her up, and all of the details she has noted about the car have been spot on. Bundy went on to confess to the murder of 30 women, but a lot of people think that number is a lot higher. So thank God she got out of that car.
This is the unsolved murder of Anton Jermaine Hyman. Anton was described by his mother Vanessa as a happy boy, well liked by the girls and a proper Jack the Lad. He liked basketball, music, his moped, and was also into plaiting and cutting hair. He was also a doting big brother to his little sister. On March 20th, 2004, Anton said bye to his mum and left the house. He was seen by witnesses buying a Mother's Day card and then getting into a taxi outside KFC by himself. Anton's body was discovered by a passerby around 11 a.m. on March 21st, 2004. He was lying face down in the River Brent. He'd been stabbed, shot, and beaten. Forensic examinations showed that he'd been shot with a homemade .22 caliber bullet and stabbed with a 4.5-inch knife. A call to Anton's phone had also been answered after the time that police believe he died, but they've been unable to trace whoever answered that call. Anton's family over the years have put out multiple appeals for information and even offered £20,000 as a reward for any information that leads to the killer being found. Anton's mother believes there's a fear factor around his death and anyone coming forward. She said that his death was brutal and nobody would want to hold their hands up to doing that or to even knowing about it. Police believe he was killed the evening of the 20th of March 2004. He was captured on CCTV around 8 p.m. between Greenford Avenue and Brent Valley Park in Hanwell. It's now 9 years on from this murder, and somebody out there must know something. There's been multiple arrests since Anton's death, but everyone's been released without charge, and the police are no closer to finding out what happened to Anton.
These are scary games to play in real life, part 2. This game is called Concentrate, and it's an extremely disturbing game that tells the players how they're going to die. To start the game, the person playing sits down on the ground with their eyes closed, and someone then sits behind them. Then the person behind will start lightly tapping on the player's back while saying, "Concentrate, concentrate. People are dying, children are crying. Concentrate, concentrate." Now tap on their head and say, "You just got hit with a hammer." Then poke both sides of their body and say, "You just got stabbed." Now grab their neck and swing them back and forth and say, "You just got hung." Finally, whisper in their ear saying, "You're standing on the edge of a building. You're feeling dizzy and suddenly somebody pushes you." Now tell the person to open their eyes and ask them what color did they see when their eyes were closed. And whatever color they saw will reveal how they will die. Red means you're going to get stabbed. Blue means you are going to drown. Yellow means you would die by poison. Orange means you would die by fire. Green means you would die from a great height. Purple is suffocation. Brown is buried alive. Gray is dying from a disease in the hospital. White means you would die from old age and go to heaven. And black means you would die of old age and go to hell.
One of Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire's first agents was a pedophile. This is an extremely disturbing story. So I can't find any real photos online of this guy. I don't know if he's wiped it off the face of the internet, but his name was Robert David Villard, or Bob Villard. He was an acting coach for young and aspiring actors, and he represented a number of the clients that he coached as well. So in 2004, a 17-year-old boy reported to the police that Bob had molested him when he was only 13. Bob pled no contest to the charges, validated the kid's story, and basically tried to put the whole thing behind him, but the internet would never let this story die. That is because he was one of Leonardo DiCaprio's first talent agents, and he took a number of pictures of him, including this picture right here, and even this picture. Now, apparently he represented him for a good while because these are all photos that Bob took of Leo DiCaprio. And since Bob was an agent that represented a bunch of different children, only God knows how many kids he managed to victimize, or how many kids he victimized that stayed silent. So I'm looking at newspapers.com right now. Now this is interesting. This is something that I never found. I should say this is something that I never found talked about in any of these articles, but I think this is the same guy, Robert David Villard. He's right here in a newspaper in 1987. So this was over 15 years before he was charged with actually touching a child. He was caught in a CP sting. I'm finding this out right now for the first time on newspapers.com. Check this out. This is an actual old article. So this is a whole old article from 1987. Look who else is here. Robert David Villard, 40, an agent for child actors. That has to be the same guy. So he was charged with receiving or interstate transportation of CP. That is crazy. So yeah, I guess that just proves once a pedophile, always a pedophile.
This man very nearly got away with murder until he decided to strike again. It was the 15th of July 2010, and Norma Lopez was just a normal 17-year-old girl. She was a hardworking girl who loved dancing and fashion. She was attending summer school at Valley View High in California. On the day in question, she left her final class of the day and went to meet friends. She usually walked from school with her boyfriend, but on this occasion, she was alone. She was on her way to her friend's house near the school. When she never turned up, though, her friends were concerned. They decided to see if they could meet her on the way, and they walked her route across the field towards the school. It was there that they made a worrying discovery. Norma's bag, a school binder, and a broken earring were lying on the floor. Norma, though, was nowhere to be seen. They called police and a search began, but no luck. 5 days later, it was announced that there was a $35,000 reward for information leading to Norma's return. Tragically, this didn't help, and just a few hours later, Norma's body was discovered. She was found deceased just over 2 miles away from where she had vanished. She was found with no clothes on from the waist up, and her death was determined a homicide, but her cause of death was not determined. The hunt was on to find her killer, but it would actually take a year before a breakthrough. In the meantime, police tested DNA that they found on Norma's earring, and it had no matches. That was until September 2011, when a match came through following a man being arrested on an unrelated charge. This was 42-year-old Jesse Perez Torres. They also found that his DNA was all over Norma's clothes too. He was arrested for the kidnap and murder of Norma. At his trial, it was revealed that he had randomly encountered the girl on her solo walk. He had been reportedly angry about his wife leaving him during that time. An anonymous woman also testified that he had attacked her too, dragging her into his car at knife point and R-ing her. He was found guilty and was given the death penalty.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. At least that's what a lot of people think. Today we're going to take a look at some of the evidence that may refute the official story. And you can decide for yourself what you think about this whole thing, but let me tell you, some of this stuff is pretty crazy. If you want me to do a whole series about Jeffrey Epstein, his life and his crimes, let me know in the comments section below, but today we're talking about his death. On July 6, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested when he was leaving his private jet, and a little bit over a month later, he was found dead in his jail cell. When Epstein was arrested, this was absolutely national news. Everybody was talking about it. It was such a crazy story because he had so many powerful connections. He had been really good friends with the President of the United States at the time, tech moguls, and loads of other celebrities and politicians from across the planet. So everybody in prison knew that this guy needed to be guarded, right? I mean, he was literally the most high-profile prisoner in America. So this is where the story starts to get a little strange. So according to various prison psychologists that had talked to Jeffrey Epstein while he was in prison, he said that he didn't want to take his own life. Many times he expressed to these people that he didn't like pain, he was a coward, it was against his religion, and that he would literally never do that to himself. And I know that it is possible that he was manipulating people into thinking that he wouldn't do it just so that he could do it, but it is interesting that he was talking about this all the time. So the mistakes surrounding Epstein's arrest and eventual death started right away. On a prison intake form, he was listed as a black inmate. Obviously, he was white. And it also stated that he had no prior sex offense convictions, even though he was a registered sex offender. Like I said, this is the most high-profile inmate in America, so why would they make these mistakes? There were also multiple phone calls placed by Jeffrey Epstein that were not logged and not recorded by the prison system. They have no real record of who he called or who he talked to, and that is obviously a blatant violation of any prison's policy. For the entire month that he was held in prison, all of the psychologists agreed that he may have seemed a little down, but he didn't seem like he was about to take his own life. On the night that Epstein took his own life, he made a social phone call. This phone call was not recorded, it was not logged, like I said, as prison policy states that it should be. And later on, the unit manager asked who Epstein had called, and he said his own mother, which didn't make sense because Epstein's mom died in 2004. In reality, that phone call was placed to his girlfriend at the time, Karina, who was a dentist from New York. There are 3 people that have knowledge of this phone call. None of them have stated that Epstein gave any indication that he was about to take his life. And it's interesting because the New York Times asked the Bureau of Prisons for Epstein's phone logs from prison, and they released them, but that phone call was not on the logs. After this, Epstein was escorted back into his cell at 7:49 p.m. by a guard named Tova Noel. And it was at this point in the night when the story takes a turn and all of the controversy really begins. I'm going to cover all the stuff that surrounds his actual death in the next part of this TikTok series, so follow me if you want to hear like the stuff from his jail cell that's inconsistent with the official story.
This is the story of Stephanie Hamill. Stephanie, a 20-year-old travel agent from Wakefield, West Yorkshire, had her whole life ahead of her. She was engaged to the love of her life, James Garland, and was looking forward to a really bright future. Steph and James had met at school when they were just 13 and 15, proper childhood sweethearts. By the ages of 18 and 20, they'd moved into their first place together in Wakefield, and 6 months later, James asked Steph to marry him. By summer 2003, Steph had started shopping for a wedding dress with her mum Jane. The big white wedding was all she could talk about. She was so excited to marry the love of her life. Unfortunately, the couple never got to set a date for their wedding. On November 29, 2003, the couple had enjoyed a night out together in Wakefield city centre. As the pubs and bars of Westgate were closing, and after grabbing a takeaway, the couple were going to walk home, but instead decided to try and flag down a taxi. Stephanie had been walking slightly ahead of James as the pavement was narrow, and they soon saw headlights coming towards them. Stephanie stuck out her arm, and a black Mercedes pulled up just ahead of her. As it had stopped, Stephanie assumed the car was a taxi and started to climb into the back seat. Just as James was approaching the car, the driver put his foot on the accelerator and sped right past James. Stephanie's leg was still hanging out of the back door, and James could hear her desperately screaming his name. The driver of the car was 29-year-old Ioannis Revenikiotis. He'd previously sexually assaulted a pregnant woman, and just an hour before picking up Stephanie, he'd also tried to lure 2 other girls into his taxi. When they told him to get lost, he'd carried on driving, looking for his next victim. James managed to flag down a police van, and between his distraught sobs, he managed to tell them that Steph had been taken. They drove James home to see if Steph had turned up there, but as they pulled up to the house and saw it was still in darkness, a voice came over the radio and told them that someone had been found in the road just 2 miles away. Stephanie had been found on the outskirts of Wakefield, lying in the middle of the road. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Stephanie had feared for her life as Revenikiotis drove her towards the countryside. She'd managed to get the door open, falling from the car, and being hit by an oncoming vehicle. That vehicle didn't stop and dragged Stephanie down the road before fleeing the scene. It was 2 years of living in absolute limbo for Stephanie's family before Revenikiotis was tracked down. His car was found in a scrapyard in Greece, and he was arrested. It was another 2 years before he was charged, but in 2007, the jury found him guilty of Stephanie's kidnap and manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 11 years. The driver of the car that hit Stephanie and failed to stop was Mohammed Ashik. He was given a 200-hour community punishment order and banned from driving for 18 months. At the trial of Revenikiotis, and as the verdict was read, Stephanie's family could be seen punching the air in the gallery. They said nothing could bring Stephanie back, but they took some small comfort in knowing he'd been jailed.
Did this mum save her children from a horrific attack, or was she a cold-blooded killer? It was the evening of the 13th of December 2001. Tracy Roberts was at home with her 3 children in Iowa. She would later tell police of the horrors of that evening. She said 2 men broke into her house while she was bathing her 1-year-old daughter. At this point, her husband was apparently out of town. She told police that she ran to her son Bert's room and gave him the baby before being pulled back. She said one of the intruders choked her until she became unconscious. Now, Bert apparently stayed in the bedroom guarding his two younger siblings and arming himself with a baseball bat. A short time later, when Tracy realized she had regained consciousness, she ran to her bedroom and apparently grabbed a weapon from a safe. She then fired her weapon at one of the men, causing him to collapse onto the bathroom floor. The other intruder apparently escaped. Now, Tracy's 11-year-old son, Bert Pittman, backed up his mum's story, but there were doubts. Investigators found Tracy's neighbor, 20-year-old Dustin Wade, dead in the home and began to analyze the scene. Interestingly, he'd been shot 9 times with 2 different guns. Tracy explained this by stating that her and her children were trying to get out of the house after she had shot the man, and they saw the person on the floor move, so she shot him again. She said in the frenzy and the panic, she'd grabbed a different weapon to do so. She then said when she found out the intruder was Dustin, she was devastated. She knew Dustin's family, and her husband Michael actually had apparently grown quite close with him. Police started looking into finding intruder number 2, who had seemingly got away, but with no luck. They then started to wonder if he even existed. Interestingly, nothing of value had been stolen from the house. The only thing that was found was an old computer, which had carefully been placed into Dustin's car, which was on the drive. A paramedic also stated that the marks found on Tracy's neck did not match with strangulation and seemed to be self-inflicted. Tracy's ex-husband John was looked into as the pair were in the middle of a custody battle. To police, she painted a picture of an abusive ex who she alleged SA'd her son Bert. He denied this and claimed that Tracy was the one who was abusive to him and that she'd even threatened him once with a gun. Then investigators turned their attention to Tracy's husband Michael. As I said, he'd had a close relationship with Dustin, but apparently had been physically abusive to Bert. He allegedly even broke his nose once during an argument. Michael denied this, but he did have a history of violence. He was arrested in December 2000 after an argument with Tracy. Tracy accused him of pushing her to the floor and making her hit her head. Michael claims that Tracy once got him drunk and tried to suffocate him with a bag. Following all the accusations and counter-accusations, the pair divorced. The case went cold and Tracy moved to Nebraska with her children. Now, Dustin's mum remained incredibly frustrated about her son's death. To her, it didn't make any sense. Dustin considered Tracy a friend, and he also hadn't armed himself with any type of weapon going into the house. He'd also just kind of casually parked his car on the front drive. His mum's concern grew when she found out that he actually had been shot into the back of the head 4 times. This indicated that the shooting was not self-defense. The case was reopened in 2008 and there were more troubling revelations. The house hadn't been particularly disheveled and there were inconsistencies in Tracy's story. Many who knew her described her as manipulative and aggressive. Then there was the discovery of a notebook in Dustin's car. Dustin had seemingly written a strange tale about being contacted by John, who was Tracy's ex-husband. In the notebook, it said that John wanted Dustin to kill Tracy. However, there was something strange about this tale in the notebook. It gave very specific details about John that Dustin would never have known on his own. Investigators started to wonder whether Tracy had fed Dustin this information to write in the notebook on the night he was killed. They noticed that the language that was used in the notebook was almost identical to the language Tracy used to describe John. She was arrested and charged with Dustin's murder. It later came out that Tracy had asked Dustin to come to the house on his own sometimes to do paperwork for her. Police believed that maybe Tracy was just trying to use Dustin in order to frame her ex-husband and therefore win the custody battle. Tracy was eventually sentenced to life in prison. This case made me terrified to go to the cinema. This is the case of the horror in Screen 9. James Holmes was raised in California. His mum was a nurse and his dad was a scientist. From a young age, he was experiencing night terrors and allegedly actually tried to take his own life when he was just 11 years old. He was apparently obsessed with guns and weapons and had dreamed of becoming a mass murderer. Between May and July 2012, he legally bought 4 guns. Background checks were conducted and he was allowed the weapons. He also bought spike strips, which, if you don't know, pop the tires of cars if they chase after you. On July the 19th, just hours before tragedy would unfold, James mailed his notebook to his psychiatrist. Inside the notebook, James detailed his plans to kill. The notebook was actually discovered later on undelivered. Just prior to entering a cinema in Aurora, James rang a crisis line to tell them about his plans to kill. However, the call was disconnected after just 9 seconds. At the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises, CCTV captures James walking into the cinema. He walks into screen 9, props open the door, and then walks back out again. Shockingly, he goes to his car and gets guns out and gas canisters. He re-entered the screen at about 12:38 p.m. and set off 2 gas canisters. When he entered Scream 9 again, he immediately opens fire on the audience, instantly killing 10 people. 2 others later died in hospital from their injuries. An additional 70 people were injured. This was an absolutely packed out cinema. James also shot at people as they scrambled to exit the screen. His youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl. Witnesses said this all unfolded as there was actually a gunfight on the screen, and initially they all thought it was special effects and just part of the film. Police were actually on the scene very quickly after the first 911 call. James surrendered to the police and was arrested in the car park. He was apparently very, very calm when he was arrested and told police that he had booby-trapped his apartment. When police investigated his apartment, this was found out to be true. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences.
Well, you may not like it, but
You guys believe in duendes?
Hell yeah,
Yeah,
bro.
What?
I seen one. It was fucking weird, bro. I remember it was at this house that we live in right now too, and there's 2 glass sliding doors, and I remember the one on the right, it was open, and he moved in and he started waving down to like get my attention, like teasing me. As soon as I looked that way, it moves out the way. I couldn't tell what he was wearing, but I remember it was like small and it had like a red hat, and I was like, well, what the fuck was that? I thought I was tripping. I'm like, I'm just gonna ignore it. I go back to eating, and again it happened, and he does the same thing. I get up, I open the door, and nothing was there. And it happened like I could you not 4 or 3 times until like I got up, I closed the door, I took my cereal, I threw it away, and I was like, man, I'm gonna go to bed. Fuck this guy.
Recently, my godmother, she told me a story when she was 7 years old. She was out in the front playing with her like siblings and stuff. Out of nowhere, she hears like giggling, and she doesn't know where it's coming from. And then she turns around, and then she sees 4 duendes, but they're like dancing and laughing, but like they're in the formation of, you know how like when they're holding up a coffin, like 2 people in the front, 2 people in the back. They were in that formation. They were holding a little coffin, and the way she described it, like they were wearing a big ass sombrero, big ears, the big nose and stuff, the typical duende description or whatever. And then her mom turns pale, and she thought she was tripping because she saw the exact same thing too.
I know in the San Bernardino area, where like near Cal State, San Bernardino, it's like a mountain area.
Going up to Lake Arrowhead.
That's where like people still live up there, saying that there's duendes roaming around that area.
Actually,
They didn't want us to visit this island. This is North Fox Island in Lake Michigan, once the home of America's largest pedophile ring and CP ring. For years, this island was ran by a man named Frank Sheldon. These are the original cabins from the island, and children, yes, were assaulted in these very rooms. Frank Sheldon, the owner of the island, was the Epstein of his day, and he would fly children out to this island. Groups of men would assault them on camera while they were filming and taking pictures, and then Frank would fly them back to their hometown, drop them off, and no one believed them about what was happening. This right here is actually Francis Sheldon's original cabin, at least the ruins of it. But how did this happen? Well, Frank Sheldon actually had a private airstrip installed on. And guess who granted the permit for that? John Benet Ramsey's grandfather. I'm not making this up. Truth can be stranger than fiction. We explored this island to raise awareness about what was happening here and how it's still happening today. The full documentary we filmed is on my YouTube now. The link is in my bio.
You heard about the terrifying terrorist attack that was planned for a Taylor Swift concert recently. If it had gone ahead, it would have killed thousands. Taylor Swift recently embarked on her legendary Eras tour. It started in 2023 and she's been performing all across the globe. She recently graced London with her presence, and adoring fans queued up for days to get a glimpse of the star. How this could all have easily ended in tragedy. She'd planned to perform in Vienna on the 8th, 9th, and 10th of August. To her fans' disappointment, though, the shows were cancelled. When people found out why, they were absolutely horrified. A 19-year-old Austrian man was arrested and was said to have links to ISIS. He allegedly plotted to attack fans outside of the stadium and had collected knives and homemade explosive devices. It's believed that when officers searched the suspect's home, they discovered an arsenal of chemical substances and dangerous devices. A 17-year-old and a suspect were also arrested in connection with the plot. Taylor actually spoke out about this and said that thanks to officials, we are grieving concerts, not lives.
April 16th of this year, 25-year-old Michaela Standridge posted this cryptic message on her Facebook page. 5 days later, she disappeared. Kayla was last seen running out of a house that she was staying at near Concrete, Washington on April 21st. After running out of the house, she called 911 and could be heard screaming for help, but shortly after the call went through, her phone disconnected. Michaela made her last phone call approximately 15 minutes later to a family member, but she vanished right after and hasn't been seen or heard from since. The Skagit County Sheriff's Office arrived to the area where the 911 call was made not long after, but didn't find anyone who needed help. During the investigation, authorities searched the property where she was staying at and interviewed the people living at the home, which was on Skagit View Drive, but this provided no leads. It wasn't until Search and Rescue expanded their search that they found Michaela's phone, which was located near the Skagit River. Authorities have since searched the river by boat, drones, and helicopter, but Michaela is still missing. According to a recent post from Michaela's aunt, she's believed to still be alive. Because of her last cryptic message on Facebook, it's not known if Michaela is being held against her will or if her disappearance has anything to do with human trafficking. But Michaela's family asks that if you see her, to take a picture of her and to try to stay with her until authorities arrive. Michaela is roughly 100 pounds with blue eyes, and she currently has blonde and pink hair. If you have any information about Michaela's disappearance, please contact the numbers on the screen.
This child was missing since 2019 and has been found alive underneath the staircase. 4-year-old girl named Paisley Schultes was removed from custody of her biological parents along with her sister. Although it has not been revealed on why her parents, Kim Cooper and Cole Schultes, were no longer legally allowed to look over their own daughters. In July of 2019, Paisley suddenly vanished from her family home while her older sister was at school. She had been living near Ithaca, New York. Although the police strongly suspected her biological parents, they had no proof at all proving this. The police were actually able to search the parents' property, but they denied having anything to do with their daughter's mysterious disappearance. And the police could not find Paisley inside despite thoroughly looking. However, years later in 2022, the police received a tip that Paisley could still be in the house after all, and was being held in a secret hidden location. At first, it seemed nothing was off about the property at all. But after about an hour, one of the detectives noticed something odd about the stairs. And acting on gut instinct, the officer looked a little closer and eventually found a small hiding place. And when they were able to get closer and get a better look, they found Paisley hiding in the little small space. Paisley's parents were then charged with custodial interference and endangering the welfare of a child.
Is the worst candy ever made.
Nah, hold on. Let me really think about this shit, bro.
I'm gonna talk my shit. I have 4. So almond joy's part of that. I hate almond joys with a passion.
There's people that fuck with that though.
Nah, I don't care.
There's
bro.
like a big ass like audience.
Sorry,
when it comes to like the minty chocolate, people love that shit. I don't like it. It's disgusting to me. But yo, there's a lot of people who like that.
Yo,
shit.
why'd you get canceled over some chocolate, bro? I'm gonna get tight. But milk duds are disgusting. Butterfingers are disgusting.
Ew. I know what's the top of the top, most disgusting, worst candies of all time. If I see that, I will throw up.
What?
Red chilies, some shit like that.
Oh, no, I know what you're talking
What
about.
is that? Even the gum is disgusting.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
The red gum?
The red gum is just like cinnamon flavored.
Who eats that candy, bro? You know what I'm talking about?
I'm gonna have you rank these from best to worst.
Oh my, I think this is gonna be harder than the candy, bro.
Snickers, M&M's, specifically the ones
yellow bag.
Yeah, yellow bag with
Oh
peanuts.
my god.
Kit Kats.
Oh.
On June 11th, 2005, Todd Geib seemingly vanished from an all-night keg party. But 22 days later, his body was found standing upright in a private lake that had already been previously searched. At around 9:30 that night, Todd and his friends left a restaurant to go to an all-night keg party that was being held in an apple orchard in Casanova, Michigan. As the night went on, things started to get really rowdy, so Todd decided to leave the party at 12:45 a.m. and walk back to his apartment, which was only about a mile and a half away. Doing so, he called a friend to tell them that he was on his way back home. Over the next 10 minutes, Todd made a series of bizarre phone calls. At one point, he called a friend and said, quote, "I'm in a field," end quote, before the call ended. The friend called back and Todd picked up, but all they could hear was what sounded like heavy breathing, and then the call cut out. No other calls went through after this, and his phone wasn't used again. This was the last time anyone heard from Todd. He was soon reported missing, and an extensive search was launched involving more than 1,500 volunteers and police officers. Authorities even searched by air, combing through the orchard and everything around it, even the stretch of road he would have taken to get home. Authorities brought in bloodhounds, which tracked Todd's scent up until the start of the road he would have taken to get home, but that's where it ends. It seemed as if Todd vanished into thin air, but 22 days later, his body was found in a private lake just 2 miles from his home, right in the middle of an area that had already been searched. But the odd thing was the way Todd's body was found. His body was found standing upright in the water with his head and shoulders above the surface. Nothing was weighing him down, and he had no external injuries. His remains only had little decomposition. His clothing appeared to be completely clean of debris, sand, and that slimy green substance that lays on the surface of bodies of water. He also didn't have any insects in or on his body, which is unusual if somebody was actually in the water for 21 days. A group of former NYPD detectives named Kevin Gannon, Anthony Duarte, and Michael Donovan and Todd's mom had an independent investigation conducted. And from that, they learned that while Todd had been missing for 3 weeks, he had actually only been dead for 2 to 5 days before being found. The autopsy report also showed no water in Todd's lungs at all. Kevin and
On. Who else, man? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. On. Who else, man? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. On. Who else, man? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. On. Who else, man? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. On. Who else, man?